Alrighty, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Hajim Zero here, back with another quick movie review. This one is another one of my favorites, starring Denzel Washington, and of course Russell Crowe did a good job in this movie as well. This one is American Gangster. Came out 2008, and it's pretty much the story about Frank Lucas and Richie Roberts, but mostly Frank Lucas. And to rewind the story a little bit, doing research on this film and the story itself, come to find out, not only is based on a true story, but it pretty much picks up indirectly where the movie Hoodlum had left off. The and I'm trying to think if that character was also in the movie. He could have been in the movie Life as well. Again, we could talk about it in the comment section. But Bumpy Johnson was a known gangster in New York, Harlem in particular. But he wasn't your average gangster. He actually had principles. He knew how to not attract attention to himself, and that's what Frank had picked up on real quick. So the only difference with Frank is that he took really good advantage of what was going on at the times with the Vietnam War and went down and cut off the middleman and all that other stuff. But to go back to the real part of the story, and again a little bit of the movie Hoodlum. Hoodlum was a story of Bumpy Johnson back in the 1920s in Harlem, New York, and it was, I think, Lawrence Fishburne, Tim Roth, and Andy Garcia were in that. But like I said, in researching this, when that particular movie had ended, say cut a little bit to the 60s, and that's where Frank's story had kind of started. For all I know, I got to see the movie again. A young potential Frank Lucas could have been in there, but I highly doubt that. It's been a while since I've seen Hoodlum. I really don't remember how it ended. I remember certain scenes, but again, when we could talk about in the comment section, but that's what I do know. And then the movie Life, which was a comedy movie that started, what was it? Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence. Even though their characters were fictional, Bumpy Johnson was a real person that they were talking about, and had indirectly was the one who was running the whole moonshine thing, bootlegging, if you want to call it, from New York down to the South. But of course, if you saw the movie, they get framed for a murder, and then yada yada yada. And even connecting that even further, the same guy that plays Bumpy Johnson, in this movie, he was in the movie Life, playing the guy that got killed by the cop. And then Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy's characters were the ones who got framed for it. And I believe, ironically too, the same guy was in Hoodlum as well. So, but given that little bit backstory, to who Bumpy Johnson was, he really managed a certain, I think what Frank said, he managed a company or something like that. But he was still, doing dope and organized crime behind the scenes, because he learned it from the Italians. And what made Frank, I think, much more, you could say, scary or powerful, is that once he knew how to get his drugs from the source, and then as well as young as he was, and how, of course, with the times, a lot of people looked up to him. He was wearing a business suit. It's not that flashy. It's just a basic generic suit. And how he knows how certain things, what cops might do. And he even said it, that damn chinchilla coat is the one thing that had messed me up, because that was one of the pictures, at that boxing match fight that got the attention. And of course, he's a black man. He got so close to the ring. And then Joe Louis had shook his hand. And another thing that was smart about him, he knew how to take the racial, prejudice to his advantage as well. And just like what the guy said in the movie, no nigger in the history of America, cannot accomplish what the American mafia hasn't done in 100 years. And it's kind of funny that even in the eyes of crime, of course, criminals don't, they're all doing bad things. They're not going to see anything equal to it. Only time they will side with another person of color if they can benefit from it. And even the prison systems like that, with some of the gang warfare, even them skinheads are going to do deals with the Mexicans or with the blacks and because it's all a whole system. But it was just funny that even like the documentary had said behind the scenes is that he was just another black man that knew how to conquer everything in the white man's world. And even when he had got busted in the story, the main people that had some of the people that testified against him were other Italian crime bosses, because he put them out of business. Yeah, and even in the movie they had came at him at one point, and that's what one of his comrades was even saying. Yeah, it was one of the main. I think he was the main Italian guy. I can't remember who he was particularly, but I know the guy's face. If you've seen the movie The Odyssey, he was Odysseus in that. Vanessa Williams was also in it as well. That's how I personally recognized him when I seen him. But yeah, I think he was one of his colleagues that was giving him information on what the Italian mafia was doing. And I think at a certain point they were trying to cut and do a deal. And and also I think that same dude knew Bumpy Johnson, but that guy's a really good actor. I remember seeing him in The Odyssey, and of course now he looks physically different. He's older and a little bit bigger versus when he did The Odyssey. But this movie was also loaded with a bunch of stars in it. But I get to that in a minute, right after talking about the whole not Bumpy Johnson, Frank Lucas and Richie Robertson's thing. But the funny thing about this movie is that the criminal is pretty much a family man, and the cop is pretty much the non-family man. He even had an affair, I believe. You can call it an affair, but I know he was sleeping around with one of his secretaries or something like that. But even his wife had called it out, and it was funny because like Training Day, he was one of the police officers who said no to corruption. In the beginning of the movie, he found like $100-something million in unmarked cash, and I think it was really for a dirty cop, and he had gave it back. And then at one point, somebody in the precinct said, "Yeah, fucking Boy Scout," and then it got to the point where he couldn't even work with his own police officers, and at the end of the movie, it came full circle to why, because they were all dirty. They were all being paid, by Frank and even as criminals as well. So, it's like I said, yeah, Frank knew how to play the system. Even when he went overseas, he knew how to get a passport. They even knew what was being shipped back, and as long as they were being paid for it, of course, that's how he got away with it. But at the same time, he was slick on how he had hid the drugs being transported back. It's just that, of course, they knew, the officials that had let him do it and all that, and of course, and he went to the officials to get a legit passport, so they couldn't say it was a fake. And the one flaw in this movie, though, it really didn't say how he did get a lot of money in the beginning to even do that. But I think if you watch like the documentary, even the one on BET, they might explain it. But the thing is, Denzel and Russell, they did a very good job in doing the performance, and even the real Richie Roberts looks just a tad bit like him, and he even said that he even described to him what the clothes he would wear back in the 60s and 70s, and to really get that whole period right. So going with behind the scenes, there's, like I said, there's a lot of stars in this film. Ted Levine, who was Buffalo Bill, is in this. T.I. is in this. Common, Chiwetel Ejiofor, if I pronounce his name right. He's in Doctor Strange, and if you look right by my Gundam, you can see the Carl Mordor, toy of him I indirectly have. Who else is in it? Ruby Dee, I believe, the late Ruby Dee. But anyway, this movie's loaded with stars. Even the guy that betrayed Richie's ex-wife, she's a known actress as well. I'm thinking of some more, but Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead has a small cameo in this, and John Ortiz, and that's pretty much all the ones I can think of. But anyway, currently right now, the real Frank Lucas and Richard Roberts, they're still alive. I think Frank is in a wheelchair, and at the end of the movie, it was funny. He said, with one phone call, I could be back in business. This is like right after he got out of prison. And the funny thing is that, even today, he on a documentary, he said he would do it again, but he hasn't been doing, much criminal activity, to be honest. But I know that he is being watched, so, at this point, he even said it, I want to be left the hell alone, at this point. Yeah, I don't really want to do it now, since I know I'm being watched and my phone's probably being tapped, and they're looking at a few of my associates. Hell, they're probably even looking at some of my extended family who could be in jail to see if, hey, has Frank contacted you? But, this movie has so many layers on corruption, and even in the drug trade. And it's been going on for years. Like, to get a little bit political, when the Black Panthers had showed up, some of the FBI had even went to these drug kingpins, and it was indirectly the same thing what Frank did, except Frank had went to them. It is the feds then had went to the Italian, well, I tell you about not Italian, but just drug kingpins in general. Yeah, but it's really at a certain point had got out of hand, because Frank Lucas, just like in Training Day with Alonzo, he was holding a whole community hostage. And when he got busted, that's why he didn't flinch, because he knew he had a lot of testimony of people who knew that he had took care of them. And he even said in the movie, I took care of Harlem, and Harlem's going to take care of me. So, the thing is with Frank, the best way I could describe it, with the Frank Lucas and Alonzo Harris character, I think their methods were somewhat the same, but somewhat different. I think Alonzo was much more intimidating. Well, I take that back. Both of them were intimidating, but I think with Frank, it had to build up to a certain extent to when he officially had killed someone. So, like, another star, Idris Elba's in here as Tango, someone that owed money to Bumping It, and Frank was gonna collect. So, he wasn't violent with him until the second interaction, and that's when he had executed him, because he pretty much told him, fuck off, I ain't giving you shit. And then that's when he said, oh, what, you gonna blow my head in front of everybody? And he just pulls the trigger. So, but that was just one murder. Of course, it had a whole rap sheet, but that's what numbed down the whole sentence, was that he had snitched on a lot of, not only his own family, but he mostly gave up a lot of police officers. So, it was just crazy, seeing all that. And, I wasn't as shocked that they were taking bribes or being corrupted, but it was just kind of funny and that's why I mentioned the Black Panthers, because, with J. Edgar Hoover, he knew that, he even said it, with black people unifying with each other, that's what scared him the most. But to me, I was, personally, I was thinking it shouldn't just be black people, but it's everyone who's getting their ass kicked by the government. And even with the Black Panthers, even some of them, were, congregating or I don't know what the word you want to use, but even siding, not really siding, but I do not know the word I'm looking for to say, you could say integrate or connect, even with some of the hippies who were in social movements against the government. You could say women's rights, or you could just say, of course, at the time, speaking out against the Vietnam War. And also, they don't want them drugs and shit in their fucking neighborhood, and policing the police. So, I don't know the whole deep extent to what it was, but I do know they had worked with certain white people, and they even worked with other social groups when they realized, okay, we're all getting our asses kicked by the same person. Let's just unite and shake up the government into scaring them, which technically did happen. But until they started planting informants, that's when the whole thing had got fucked up. So, and even with the informants, I'm not sympathizing with them, because even the government had put a gun to their head and saying, if you don't do this, we can fuck your life up. So, going back to the main point, it was just funny how the corruption was literally all over the place. You had the kingpin that went to them and bribed them through the Italians, you know, and vice versa on a separate subject with, you know, law enforcement going to, you know, kingpins and saying, hit certain neighborhoods, i.e. the projects and the ghettos, don't go to the white neighborhoods and give them that shit. And it was just unbelievable. You know, but that's for a topic for another day, you know, when of course I'm just rambling on. So I see you guys in the next review. It's probably gonna be, let me look. What is the next movie? I'm looking at my wall right now. Oh, it's The Hangover 2. Alrighty, so talk to you guys later. Peace.